So with this tool in Lightroom, you can take photos like this and turn them into this. Morning everybody, fantastic to see you all again. So, when this was my Bible, The Print by Ansel Adams, and I used to use these things to print photos like this from this type of paper in the darkroom, then it was tricky. I used this to dodge and burn to make things brighter and darker on my prints that I used on my black and white and larger. And I used to think it was the best thing ever, to be honest. I absolutely loved it. But it was tough. Now we've got Lightroom and things are just easy. And this tool, the brush tool, is the most powerful tool in Lightroom. And it's the tool that I don't think photographers use enough. You can dodge and burn with it, but I want to show you some other things that you can do with it as well. How you can just selectively do changes with it. You can change textures, you can change glow, you can change just how the feeling of an image is, make it warmer or cooler in certain parts. And along with the radial filter, the graduated filter, it is such an amazing suite of tools in these masks. So we're going to get started with this image here, and stick around because I'm also going to talk about my iPad as well and how I use the pen on my iPad, because that's really, really useful. Okay, so let's jump into this image. So this is an image that I took a while back, and you can see that the edited version looks somewhat different. So I'm just going to quickly show you how I did that. So I'm going to edit the whole thing on this, but on the other images I'm just going to show you just some tips. So it was a pano this, and I decided that I actually didn't like the left hand side of it, so I wanted to crop in about there and probably keep that side there and pull in there. So that was my crop. I felt that worked well. I like this lake here and how it was reflected with the sort of trees here. I thought it was balanced quite nicely. But when I was there, the sun sort of was crossing across it here. Now obviously this is a raw image, so until I add some contrast you can't really see it, but I didn't like it being bright in this bottom corner. I wanted to change that. So first of all, let's just do a quick edit on it. We're going to add some contrast, we're going to increase the brightness, we're going to reduce the highlights, we're going to add a little bit of shadow, some whites, reduce the blacks, maybe add a little bit of clarity and some vibrance. So that's like a basic edit. I'm not worried too much about the sky at the moment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to work on this bit at the bottom. So you could add a linear gradient to this, and I think that's probably the best thing to do here. So I'm just going to reduce the exposure a little bit here, and the shadows and the whites. Try and make it as subtle as possible, make it look like there was a shadow going across. I think that's not too bad. And then I could probably just do a quick edit on the sky. And I'm going to come to the brush in a second, but just bear with me. I'm just going to intersect that with a linear gradient. And yeah, I think that's going to be good. But actually, rather than do that, why don't I brush it on? So what I could do is I could just do the edit that I want to do on the sky. So I'm going to darken it, probably warmen it a little bit, reduce the highlights a little bit, increase the shadows, but I don't really like it around the mountain there. I don't think it works very well. So I want to reduce some of that effect there. So what I can do is I can just subtract with the brush, and then I can use a fairly big brush and then just go around and subtract at the bottom. And I find the brush is a good way to be a little bit more selective than just using that radial filter or the graduated filter. So here, can you see there's a halo over the mountain? Just by subtracting some of that effect, I can get rid of that. Now I've got it on quite a low flow at the moment. Let me go into those actually. So the size is how big the brush is, and you can change that with the mouse really easily, just by moving the mouse like that, or the wheel on the mouse. The feather is how much feather you've got, so that's like how soft it is at the edges basically. The flow is how many percentage of that effect you apply in each brush stroke. So if I did it as 10% flow, it would take 10 brush strokes over that area to get to 100% flow and apply all the effect. And the density is almost like it's a stopper, so it's the maximum amount that you can apply in total. You can never go past that. I never change density. I don't really see the point of it. If I want to change my effect, I can go down here and change it. And then the amount here is that once you've done it, you can say, okay, I like that, but I did it too much, or I want to do it a bit more. And that can just increase or reduce the total effect. So that's looking a bit better now. I think I quite like the sky. So the next thing to do is I'm just going to add and create another brush here. And with this brush, I'm going to brush on some brighter areas in this foreground. I want to highlight the trees more. I want to brighten up the lake a little bit. So all I'm going to do is I am just going to increase the exposure and the shadows and the texture. Now, if you think, oh, how's that going to affect it? A good tip is just click outside the area. So if I just click there and then click invert, then you can see these changes that I'm making, how it's going to look on the whole image. So I want to make sure I don't want to blow out any areas here. So I'm going to add a little bit more clarity, reduce the texture. So I think that's probably looking okay. So now I can just invert back, and now I can just apply that mask wherever I want it. So I'm going to reduce the brush size quite a bit, and then I just want to just paint that in. I'm going to increase the feather to about 20%, and all I'm going to do is just paint that in where I think I want a bit up there, a bit down there. I'll increase the lake, but not over that side. And that is looking pretty good. Now you could also just add a bit on the mountain here. And that is how easy it is to do. It's so simple just to change an image like that. You know, I've gone from an image that looked like that to that in no time at all. So just before I talk about the other ways of using the brush tool, I want to talk to you about something that I'm involved in this year, that I've been involved in for the last couple of years, which is the 5-day deal. I'm sure you've probably heard about it by now, but if you haven't, it's an amazing way to get lots of different courses for a really good value. So you can get courses from myself, Master Peter Everson, Gavin Hardcastle, the F-Stoppers, and I've done new things for this specific course. So I've launched a woodland ebook, and I've also included my Lightroom masterclass and my 50 favourite locations ebook as well. And I know that Master Peter Everson, because he's here with me at the moment, has launched a course on Milky Way photography as well. And it just really is fantastic value for money. Go and have a look at it. There's a link in the description below. It massively helps my channel out, but more importantly, 10% of everything goes to charity. So we aim to raise lots and lots of money for different charities. It's a really good thing, and if you're looking to get a course for amazing value, I think there's something like $5,000 worth of courses. Okay, so how else can you change your images? How else can you use the brush? Well, let's go on to this image here. And this image is a really good example of how I start to combine masks, and especially luminosity masks and color masks. For instance, in this one here, what I want to do is I just want to pull out the highlights of the blue here and just make them pop a little bit more. I mean, it's not looking too bad, but I just want to do it a little bit more. So what I can do is I can select the color range and do that, and that's going to select the blue. But you can see it's selected other blue areas. It's the mountain up here, not a little bit of the sky. And if I start to make changes now, you can see that the top of the image is changing as well. But so what I can do is I can make the change on the water and think, okay, well, how do I want that to look? I want to warm it up a little bit, and I want to reduce the clarity of it a little bit, and then I want to add some more whites. Then I can click Option, I think it's Alt on the PC, and then intersect with brush. And then basically when I start painting, it's only the areas where that brush and that color luminosity mask, that color mask, intersect. So as I start painting, you can see that the mask as a whole disappears, and now I can just paint on that effect, and it's really light. I'm doing it at 20% flow, so I've got to go over 5 times to get the whole effect, and I can decide where I want it. I can be really selective where I want it, or I can just sort of brush it on like that. And that has then taken this image from that to that. I've just made the water pop a little bit more. It's a really simple way of doing it, but you can do this in so many different scenarios. So for instance, on this image here, if I just want to select this particular green, I can just go to color range, select this green, but I don't want to change everything where this green is. I just want to change it where I paint it on. So again, I can increase the exposure. Maybe I want to make it a little bit greener. I want to increase the whites, maybe add a bit more texture where that is, or reduce the texture. And then again, I can do option, intersect, brush, and now I just want to create some modeling light. So I just want to do it just on the edges here, and just where there's already some highlights, and I'm just going to pull out those highlights a little bit more. And it's just that. I probably don't want to do it on that side. I've just gone from that to that. A tiny, tiny change. But you can see how effective it can be. So the next way of using the mask is actually using it to create 3D modeling of things. I use this all the time on tree trunks. So you can see on this tree trunk here, I've actually, on the left-hand side here, if I just look at the before and after, you can see that I've just made it pop a little bit more. I've just painted a little bit of brightness, a little bit more texture on the left-hand side. And if you wanted to, you could go in and I could say brush, just darken down the exposure a little bit. And with a really small brush, I could just darken this other side. And it just creates just a little bit more modeling on that. And I do that all the time on tree trunks. Again, on this, I think it's a really good example. This is my local woodland, which this was taken a year ago. But I think if I get this right, just when the leaves are just at the right colour and I get some nice conditions with the mist like this, it'd be good. But this tree, I just want to have a little bit more brightness on the left-hand side. So again, I can go to brush. I can say, okay, I want to add a little bit of brightness, a little bit of shadow, a little bit of white, a little bit of clarity, and I want to add a little bit of warmth. So I can just then paint that on where I want it. And again, it's subtle. I just want it a little bit more there, a little bit up there. But it's really easy to control that effect with the brush. So again, I've not done much. I've just gone from that to that, but it just adds a little bit more. And it's those little touches that make such a big difference to your photos. You know, you could do the same in this. I could darken down this and lighten up these areas here. You can spend hours doing it. I'm going to get onto the iPad in a minute, but just let me show you just a little tip. So if you're doing it on a trunk like this, then if you get the brush and I just want to do it in a straight line, and I say I want to darken down the underside of this. So we'll get a brush, and I'm just going to add a little bit more flow just so you can see it. We're going to darken it down a little bit, and then here I'm just going to click where I want it to start and then click where I want it to end. And you can see it draws a straight line. That's useful if you're doing seascape stuff where there's really straight horizon. I find it useful for trees as well. And now I can update that effect. I can reduce the shadows a little bit. Maybe I can cool that side of the branch off a little bit. Again, these things are just subtle. You can see the change I've made is just from that to that, but they can make a big difference in the image. Okay, there's another trick whilst I'm just on this image, which is really, really good. So if you just click new brush and you make it quite big, so we're going to make this a lot bigger. So you can use the square bracket or whatever you want. So I'm going to make it quite big, about that big. I'm going to have it really soft. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to look at an effect that I've created before, which is called distant glow. You can save brushes or effects that you've used before. It's got a lot of exposure and contrast and whites, and I reduce the clarity a little bit. In fact, I can reduce it a little bit more, I think. Once I've got that, I just want to dab that on. I'm going to do it on a really low flow, and you can see that as I dab it, it's just going to brighten up this area a little bit. And you can brush it on if you want, but I just like to dab it. Now, it may be that I just want a little bit more flow, but you can see once you've done it, it's gone from that to that. Now, I feel that that's probably just a bit much. So one of the good things when you're doing this, if you intersect that, or you can start doing it the other way around with a luminance range, and then you just add in the bright areas of this image. So I'm just going to select the bright areas, and I'm going to fade it off into darker areas, then that, if I just do it with and without the luminance range, doesn't lighten the branches. So it just creates a little bit of glow. I've probably done that a little bit too much, so you can then just reduce it down a little bit. It's a really good way of just adding glow in a more controlled way than using a radial filter when you're doing it in forests like that. I also do it in areas like this. So say I wanted to add a bit of glow at the end of this road here. This is halfway through an edit. Again, I can just add that brush. I can go and find the distant glow one, and then I can just dab it in. You can see here, as I'm just dabbing that in, I'm just creating a little bit of a glow there. I can be controlled on where I do it. I can fade it out, add a little bit more there. And that can look really good. And once you've done it and you spent a bit more time than that on it, you can get something that looks a bit like this, which was my final image. And I think, yeah, actually, I think the one I've just done there maybe looks a little bit better. Okay, before we go on to have a look at the iPad and I talk to you about another top tip, I just want to talk about this week's sponsor, and that is MPB. They're a platform to buy used equipment and sell your own used equipment, and they're amazing. So I've been looking to get a Nikon tilt shift lens for a while, but they're really expensive. So I went on to here, and you can see that I've probably done this search before, but if I go Nikon tilt shift into here, there's basically a few tilt shift lenses. The 90mm one was one that I was keen on getting. I can actually search for that as well if I want to and say, tell me when it comes available. But I'm also super keen on this one here, which is the 24mm tilt shift lens, because I want to do a video on it and I also want to try it out, especially in woodland photography. And you can see there's two excellent conditions here. You can see what it's got. The good thing about MPB is that they check all this equipment and they also give a 6-month warranty, which is fantastic. So now I can go ahead and either trade something for that, so I can put another lens in or something else and they'll give me a really good price for it, or I can just add that to my basket, and now I've got that in my basket I can check out. So you will see a video on that tilt shift lens. Thanks to MPB for sponsoring this video. They are a worldwide platform as well. So if you want to save some money and you want to get some used equipment, or you want to sell some of your used equipment, they just make it so easy. So go and check out MPB, and thanks ever so much for sponsoring this week's video. Right, let's have a look at how I use my iPad, because I think this is where I feel if you get a little bit more connected to your photo. It's a little bit like using the burn stick in the past, where you know, you just wanted to lighten or darken certain areas. So what I do on here is, again, it's very similar to what I would do, but I wanted to show you on this shot here, which was a shot from last weekend. So if I just want to, I want to darken and do something with this foreground a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a brush, and to begin with, I'm just going to just sort of brush it on here. I'm going to reduce the exposure and reduce the shadows a little bit. I can just change the size of the brush and the feather of the brush here. I think it's going to be okay what I've got at the moment. So basically what I want to do now is I just want to darken down this area here, which is just in a little bit of shadow, and darken down this area and then this area here under, and I've just zoomed in a little bit to do that. So I just want to darken down this area, because I feel like the light is reflected more into this area here, and I just want to show that. So basically what I've done is just darken down that. Obviously then I can control that afterwards. If I want to change that effect a little bit, then I can control that effect. The other thing that I might want to do is I might just want to just make it a little bit cooler as well. Okay, then the other thing that I might want to do is I just might want to increase the brightness of this grass down here. So I'm just going to add a brush, and then I am going to paint that just on here for now. And I'm just going to increase the brightness, the whiteness, and the clarity of this. And again, I'm just going to do it really a little bit at a time. I just want to get it on there. I want to get it on this top bit here. And just to brush a little bit of brightness. It's fun doing it with your iPad. You don't have quite as much control. You can't use the intersect, but the brush tool in its many forms and different ways you can use it, the fact that you can use intersect in the main Lightroom, the fact that using the pen just on your iPad's just so, it's very tactile and it feels quite nice. You could use a tablet as well, obviously, if you wanted to on your PC. It's just such a powerful tool, and every photographer, I think, should be using that tool because it's that fine touch in just those little bits where you're just leading the eye a little bit differently in the image that makes such a big difference to the photo. Anyway, if you have enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. That's it for this week's video. Thanks ever so much for watching. Until next Sunday, bye.